Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Stewartry Area Committee on Wednesday, 15th of November. Just to let you all know, at this point, the Area Committee meeting will be live streamed on Teams, and that a recording will be available online shortly after the finish of this meeting. Could I remind members to follow the good practice guide, which includes muting microphones and switching off video feeds when you are not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any particular item, you should write the word speak in the Teams chat function, and then you will be invited to speak in order about any new issues. Hello. Should you question or issue any issues be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we can deal with the business as efficiently as possible. Usual standing orders apply, including any votes that will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has the need to leave the meeting, can I remind you to either leave the team meeting for that period of time, or if you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you're returning. This will allow us to monitor member presence. So I can see we've another councillor has arrived. I'd like to go through the adherent and any apologies and chair's approval of members' remote participation. So could I ask the clerk, Claire Rogerson, for the adherent and any apologies, and which members are in the room and those linking by Teams, please, and to confirm agreement to remote participation.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Chair. I can confirm we've got 7 members present this morning. 3 at Dar Road, who've been the Chair, Vice Chair and Councillor Stitt. 4 members present on Teams, being Councillors Blake, Harry, McFarlane and Young. And I've got 2 apologies from Councillors Lowe and Campbell. Thank you.
Okay, so item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any statement of connection or declaration of interest to declare based on the following definition? A statement of connection, for transparency reasons, members may wish to make a public statement. Declaration of interest members would now require to leave the meeting for that particular item. Nothing. Good. Okay, fine. Thank you. So number 3, minutes of the previous meeting from 20th of September 2023. Are members happy to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Over to you.
I'm happy to move them. I'm happy to move them in.
Councillor Setti, thank you. Thank you. Okay, item number 4. Our first report, members, is the annual performance report from the Health and Social Care Service covering April 22 to March 2023. I'm pleased to note that some updates on developments of the recently formed home teams and focus on addressing the issues around delayed discharge are being considered, which do remain an issue for our area. I'm sure members will also be keen to learn more about the work of the Community Waiting Times team as this service develops. Members will also be keen to learn more about the general approach to improving services post-COVID and the introduction of community treatment and care. Further details on new approaches intended to benefit our constituents is always of great interest, and the multi-agency work with partners, third sectors and communities is of real interest. Before opening the floor to members, I would like to hear more detail around the decision to close 2 care homes and the impact it's having in relation to delayed discharge and what these figures look like moving into the winter. Barbara Aitken and Peter Bryden are in attendance via MS Teams to answer any questions from our members. And I'll open the floor to members' questions and comments. So over Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And Stephanie, thanks very much for the report. I know we were a bit concerned that some of the data was a bit out of date, and hopefully going forward we'll see some figures with regards to the home team's performance in the Stewartry. Chair, through yourself, could I just ask Stephanie a couple of questions, please? Yeah, so I'll just go ahead. What I wanted to ask Stephanie was, I have actually been speaking to some care home teams in other areas of Scotland in my role as Chair of Social Work, and what I've been discovering is that they've not had to recruit from out with the region, and at the moment some of the external agencies in Dumfries and Galloway, particularly the Stewartry, are having to recruit carers from places like Girvan and South Ayrshire to come into Dumfriesshire at the moment because we're so short of care packages and due to the delayed discharge, which in effect is great, but it's not ideal going forward. So I had managed to have a little bit of a chat with some of the care workers in other regions, and they were saying that they were actually recruited as members of, say, they were employed by the council in the library service, for example, and they just had to do a 2-week training course. They didn't have to be SVQ'd, but it meant that they were taught in hoisting techniques, safe hoisting techniques, and the allocation of medication and how to move patients safely. And these carers in this other council are really enjoying the work and finding it quite satisfying. They also get paid for their time between jobs, the fuel time. And I wondered if that's something we could look at, Stephanie, going forward for Dumfries and Galloway. Maybe, I know you're working really hard at the moment because it is difficult to recruit because of the geography of the area, but could we look towards maybe, putting feelers out to see if there's anyone within the council that might like a role such as this, because it can be very, very rewarding, and it might reduce the delayed waiting times for patients that we all know of who are either in Dumfries Hospital or the hospital at Lockerbie. So it was just really to get your feedback on that as you're most qualified to answer that question. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. First of all, you're quite right. I think we've been to the other area committees, and I just want to outline about the retrospective data that's in the report and actually the contents of the report. I think there's acknowledgement by the area committees and by ourselves that probably this was set up, the reporting structure was set up in 2016, so it probably needs revisited in terms of what meets the needs of the area committee and what should we be reporting in through the IGB direction. So we are looking at that in the background. In relation to your question about the care and support at home workforce, so absolutely it is very difficult in terms of recruitment, and their terms and conditions are obviously dictated by national framework which is set in terms of government and what the rates of pay. So that's a nationally set thing which we are unable to influence that, and that goes through COSLA and all that. With regard to working locally round about recruitment, within our in-house service, which is our CAS, which is local authority run, we do have care support workers that administer medication. And when I talk about administer medication, what I mean by that is they will either prompt somebody to take their medication when they're on a visit, or they will be responsible for picking up a prescription and actually dispensing that medication for the person then to take. So that's already happening. What we are experiencing is in terms of, and you talked about the kind of moving and handling and equipment, etc., whereby insurance sometimes for our providers restricts the ability around about that, and whereby you might have equipment that needs two carers. The insurance that they have restricts them in terms of maybe training a family member round about that. But we do have the care at home collaborative set up to try and work with them to understand how we can actually change things and make a difference with some of this. We did introduce what we call payment unplanned with our independent providers. So bearing in mind that the majority of our providers are independent. We only have CAS, which is our in-house service, which provides 20% of the care, 80% is in the independent sector. And remember, these are independent businesses, so we can only encourage. We are not able to instruct. We have to direct them, and we can encourage them to do things differently. And that collaborative are stepping forward now. So we introduced payment and planned, which means they have a bit of flexibility in terms of their rotas to be able to utilise their care and support staff. And that might be utilising them for a touchdown visit, a medication visit like you've talked about, or a health and welfare check. So the work started with the independent providers round about that. Some of the independent providers are recruiting internationally as well. And particularly in the Dumfries area, that has been successful. But one of the barriers to that is round about accommodation and housing. And again, that's not within the gift of the Health and Social Care Partnership. That very much sits within the gift of other parts of the council. So it's how we join that up, because we do think there is potential for further international recruitment, but in terms of the housing situation, that presents as a barrier. We try with our in-house service to target recruitment into the areas where there's hotspots. So in particular, we know that Stewartry is a hotspot in terms of care and support, and we do have a shortage of a workforce in Stewartry compared to the other areas in the region. And what we try to do is target that locally. But again, until there's a shift, if I'm perfectly honest, until there's a shift nationally in terms of that contract, that national care at home contract, it becomes really difficult. And I know the government, they have announced that the rate of pay should increase for care and support at home. But again, we need to balance that against the against budgets, etc. So there is work underway, but obviously it would be helpful in terms of yourselves and how you can maybe influence other agendas, particularly around about the housing, that might help. And Pauline, you also talked about the travel. The terms and conditions for the independent providers are set by them. As I say, we can't instruct them to do something different, but we are encouraging them to look at different ways of working. In Annan area, we did a test of change with a local provider to take on people on a full-time contract, as opposed to what's the word I'm looking for? Not a fixed term, but an open-ended contract, and that has really helped them in terms of recruitment, where they're offering full-time contracts, because we know there's work and we can guarantee them work, because we know there's always care and support needed. So it's work in progress is probably where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Councillor Drysdale, please.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. That's actually really, really helpful, everything that you've mentioned so far. And I think, as you've said, it's probably up to us as councillors to work as hard as we can to try and help with the accommodation, because if they've nowhere to stay, obviously we're not going to get those care packages in place. And I think the sticking point for a lot of carers, whether they be through yourselves, which is the 20%, or the independent care providers, is that sometimes the jobs are so spread out and so few and far between, it doesn't make it worthwhile for that particular carer to go out for a full day. So as you have rightly said, a whole day's employment would be far more beneficial across the Stewartry, and I think that's a point well made by yourself, so thank you. What I did think about as we were talking was, I take it again, and I don't think we'll have any joy here, but could there not be a possibility, because quite a few care homes have closed down across our region, that we couldn't look again back to the IJB to open a couple of beds again as step-down care in Castle Douglas? Because at the moment, a lot of family members are travelling every day to Dumfries, or in the case I've been trying to help with, you know, right across to Lochmaben every day. And it is really difficult if you've got an elderly family member having to travel to Lochmaben, because it's nearly an hour there and an hour back. So maybe within social work and the IGB, we need to push for just even 1 bed or 2 beds in Castle Douglas Hospital, just as an interim measure, so that family members are closer. I don't know if you're able to respond on that or not, Stephanie, but thank you, and thank you, Chair, for letting me back in.
Thank you. So, Stephanie, would you like to respond to that?
Yes,
before?
please. Yes, thank you. So, right care, right place, which is the strategy for our flexible bed, intermediate beds, which is your step up, step down, was signed off by the IJB at the end of September. And that paper and that strategy is available on the internet for everybody to see. Within that, there was the proposal to introduce what we call 31 flexible beds within the system, and they flexible beds would be within a care home setting. So as of 1st of April, we are looking to introduce 31 beds across the region now and this is off the top of my head, so please don't quote me on this. I think the figure for Stewartry for them beds, I think was 6 flexible beds within the Stewartry area. But as I say, I would need to just clarify that. And what that would mean was that there would be local beds available in a care home setting for various pathways for people, whether that be palliative end of life care, or whether that be for some intermediate care, whereby our home teams would reach into the care home and provide that nursing input or provide that AHP input. So that's due to come on train the 1st of April, and that implementation plan for them 31 beds is being worked up as we speak. As well as that, we also need to look at our care home strategy, because we all know that we, in terms of care homes, I think at the beginning it was mentioned around about 2 care homes being closed, and the decision for that isn't made by the Health and Social Care Partnership to close the homes. The Health and Social Care Partnership's remit was to try and support the home to remain open. But in these 2 occasions, the independent provider made the decision to close, and that's for various circumstances that are not for discussion, obviously, in this forum. But the Health and Social Care Partnership continue to work with the care homes very closely right across the region to try and support them to be sustainable. And at any given time, we do have closed care homes, and that's due to either a COVID outbreak, where our public health colleagues, there's a process in place. If there's an outbreak in a home, you'll appreciate that that home closes for that duration. But we also are governed by the Care Inspectorate, who provide the inspection and audit visits into care home, and the Care Inspectorate at any time after their audit or their inspection can say that they want a moratorium placed on a care home until the actions of their inspection have been met. So at any given time in the system, we do have care home beds not available to us for that reason, and that can make it very difficult. As I say, the right care, right place in December, starting December through to February, the next phase round about that care home strategy is coming out to the community, whereby local elected members will also be involved and invited to the workshops that will take place. They will happen right across the region in each of the home team areas. So what I would say is look out for that coming. There'll be invitations sent shortly to yourselves to attend these workshops. As I say, it's hard balancing the bed base, and we do know, as I say, delays. I'm not going to tell you that we've resolved the issue of delays for people. Currently for Stewartry, there are 15 people in a hospital setting, whether that be in DGRI or across all our community hospitals with a DG5, DG6 postcode, who should be either in a care home bed or at home. So we are still, we still acknowledge that we have a lot of work to do at our end to try and support people to be in the right place. Thank you.
Just switching interpreters, bear with me, but thank you very much, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that explanation. We have Councillor Setti who'd like to respond.
Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Stitt.
Morning, Stephanie and Peter. Just to follow up on care homes. In Dumfries and Galloway, how many care homes have you got available? Because I've got a member of the family who works in a care home, and to have a bed there, as soon as one's empty, they're filling them up the next day. I see you've got 6 flexible beds, and I know in Dumfries and Stewartry where other care homes are, but many have you got available in Dumfries and Galloway, and is there any chance that any independent company open up a new care home in the area in the near future?
Thank you, Councillor Stitt. So within Dumfries and Galloway, I think we've got 32 care homes right across the region, and you'll appreciate, obviously, they're sporadic in their nature. So Stewartry actually has the most care homes for the size of population. The number of bed based is roughly, I think, again, it's about 998 or something like that. So just we'll say, for the sake of argument, we'll say we've got 1,000. What we are starting to understand is that the needs of people now in terms of care home settings. So if you think about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when you went into a residential setting, you probably could make your own cup of tea. You probably could probably nip to the paper shop, get your paper. What we're seeing now is the complexity and needs for people that now need a care home placement is significant, and our care homes are operating on registrations. For instance, a residential registration, which means you can't place somebody there that's got a nursing need. So the whole idea behind looking at the care home strategy is that we need to work with our care homes. Now, they're all independent providers as well. Remember, they're all independent businesses. We do not have any care homes that are owned by local authority. And we need to look at how we are supporting our care homes to be sustainable and actually meet the needs of people that require to go into a care home setting. We are bound, as I say, in terms of the pathways whereby your residential, your nursing, or your EMI, which is it's not a great term, and we need to move away from that, but somebody with complex needs in terms of mental illness. And the care homes are registered, and as I say, not all of them are registered for nursing or EMI, but they can take residential. So we need to get that bed base right. We also need to remember, and whether you agree with it or not, we also need to remember that people also can access care homes on a private basis. So whereby the partnership would be looking to place people in a care home setting, there are also people contacting care homes, and they will have private lists. And again, we have no influence over that. That is them operating their business model. I think it's really important that them flexible beds, the concept of that step up, step down in that setting, that this next year will tell us whether that is a viable option for sustainability. But we definitely, as I say, there's a lot of work for us to do in terms of our overall strategy and what the needs are in terms of these complex needs.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's great. Would you like to respond, Councillor Stitt?
I'd just like to thank you for the reply, Stephanie. I know it's a hard job, and it's just the state that we're in as a country, and it doesn't help when you've got nursing homes shutting down either.
Thank you. So, Councillor McFarlane, would you like to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Stephanie, for your responses so far. Yeah, I'm looking at, I think it's page 22 on our document where you're talking about 4 cottage hospitals have remained suspended, but have been used to provide a range of community services for local people. I attended a parking consultation in Kirkcudbright last week, and somebody quite openly said, we're wasting our time doing this consultation because we did this for the hospital and they'd already decided they were going to shut it, and now it's shut. Clearly you and I know, and as does Peter, that that's not the case, that the hospital's not shut and that it is still being used. And I really do think that it's incumbent upon us to make sure we get that message out there. I don't know how we do it, but I think there's an imperative for us to make sure that people understand the hospital's not closed, it's still being utilised, and we're actually using it for different things. That's the first point. Secondly, looking at self-directed support, we're talking about the percentages for people under and over 65 have increased. Be interested to get some more detail on that. If we could get some sort of percentages, if you could come back. And then straight after that, you've got delayed discharges, but the figures obviously are 22-23 compared to 21-22, and it would be beneficial, I think, if we could try and get some sort of updated figure on that, because it was a significant increase from 3,100 to over 6,000. And the last thing is prescribing. We need to do something about prescribing and getting the cost down, because when you look at the IJB budget and the amount of money it's spent on prescribing, then clearly that takes money away from other facilities that we need to address and such like. So yeah, but thanks for the report, very good.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. And I think that is an important point that you've raised. It's how do we make sure that we're sending a clear message regarding the hospital, that it's not closing down and just perhaps being used for other things. Stephanie or Peter, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the next round of engagement with the communities directly will incorporate the messaging round about the cottage hospitals, but I completely agree, Councillor McFarlane, that we possibly need to do some, as well as for the communities. It's also important for the staff whose substantive posts is within these cottage hospitals, because we've got to remember there is a cohort of staff at this point in time who are deployed elsewhere, working whilst the hospitals are temporarily closed. So I'll take that away in terms of that, the messaging and how we work with the engagement process through December to February to make sure we're also including that. I just wanted to come back on the SDS options. I think probably what we're starting to see again is a shift where we can't get a managed service. So basically your managed services is when we organise the care and support through the providers. That SDS option 1 has increased because I think we're having to have the discussions very early days about and be as honest with people to manage expectations that the likelihood you will have to wait for a package of care if it's a managed service. You do have other options through your SDS options to take that budget and work for what you need. So we're starting to see an increase in that, which is a positive. And then the delays we have touched on, and I totally we continue to work right across the system and that. But the prescribing one is a really interesting one, because we know there's significant amount of waste with prescribing where people are stockpiling in their cupboards, and I know you probably know people yourself that do that, whereby there's automatic prescriptions and there's no checks. But our pharmacy team are now working directly in the GP practices. So you'll get a pharmacist working in there who will do a medication review and try to alleviate some of that waste and make sure that they're having regular reviews with people in terms of the medication. But I think you're quite right, it's a huge chunk of money in terms of that, what we spend on drugs, and we do need to look closely at how we can reduce that spend. But reassuring you that people will, the outcomes in terms of people on medication, we need to make sure that's safe and efficient and doing what it needs to do. But we do know there's a lot of waste in the system.
That's great. Thank you, Stephanie, for that response. Are you happy with that, Councillor McFarlane?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. No, I'm pleased to know that certainly we've got somebody looking at the prescribing. Self-directed support, I mean, I think that's excellent. I think the more people we can get onto it, the less demand there is for our carers, and I think it addresses quite a few of the needs that we would have. And it's just a case of how do we manage that? And it's obviously a less expensive way of delivering that care, which is more bespoke to individuals. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. So next we have Councillor Young, if you'd like to comment.
Right, thank you. I fully agree with Councillor McFarlane that self-directed support should be pushed at every opportunity. It really is the way forward, and I've been saying this for many years in this forum. However, what I want to ask about is care homes and their finances. Do we, as a local authority, do we have the right to check how financially valid care homes are on an annual basis, or let's say an ongoing basis, or could we be subject to a care home closing at short notice because of financial problems? Thank you.
Stephanie, Peter, would you like to respond?
So there is a level of financial scrutiny, but it's not. I think we rely on the relationship between the care home owner and the partnership to disclose. There are things I think we can do in terms of checks, but you can never, as I say, because they're independent businesses, we don't have the ability to, as I say, to get into that detail. What I'd like to stress is that the work with the care home tactical team and the care home oversight group, which came into play on the back of COVID, the relationships with the care homes and the partnership have been strengthened because that care home tactical team works very, very closely. Our aim and objective is to sustain the care home market and support a care home, whether that be with in terms of looking after, making sure the residents are safe and well, or whether that is trying to sustain the care home for as long as it can to make sure we have that sustainable market. So that is our aim and objective. But as I say, there's been circumstances out with our control in terms of the partnership whereby independent businesses have folded. But we wouldn't be in a position, I can reassure you, we wouldn't be in a position where that would happen overnight because we've got relationships built up. We understand the landscape. There's ongoing dialogue with owners. There shouldn't be any surprises for us in terms of that. But again, as I say, they can disclose finances to some degree, but we don't necessarily get the full picture in terms of an independent provider. But there will be scrutiny in terms of the contract.
That's great, thanks. And Councillor Young, are you satisfied with that response?
Yes, to a certain extent. I know you're very limited about what you can do in financial probing, but I suppose I have a concern that our care home could close very quickly with very little notification to the council, leaving a huge financial problem. But as you say, you're limited by the legalities of it all. So I'm sure the council is doing its best to monitor what's happening within care homes. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And Councillor Drysdale?
Thank you, Chair. Stephanie, it's very interesting that Councillor Young and Councillor McFarlane have mentioned the self-directed support care. And whilst I totally accept that that is possibly the route we need to go down, I think we're all hugely aware in this room that until COSLA change the rates for self-directed support teams, we're going to struggle. I spoke myself last week and the week before to 5 people who were initially willing to look at caring for someone. Once they find out it's £11.50 an hour and no travel, it's just not viable for them. And these are magical people who we need in our communities. And they're actually getting paid, no disrespect to Aldi and other retailers, but they're going to get paid a much better salary in those kind of environments. And we need these carers in our communities. They are absolutely incredible people. But the rates they're getting paid at the moment, it's just not going to happen. And I just really think we're at a major sticking point until people like myself and other people keep pressurising COSA to change the rates for care workers, because quite frankly, for the job they do, it's really unacceptable at the moment. And I'm sure you agree with me on that. So, you know, I see them working myself. They're incredible people and they're most valued in our societies. So hopefully the system will change in Scotland, and it will change soon, because it's going to have to, or we're going to reach an even worse crisis situation with the bed blocking. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. So Stephanie, Peter, would you like to respond to that, to Councillor Drysdale?
Yeah, I think it's a very important point. Having lived and breathed, particularly around about the care and support work over COVID, and just what these people do, they're a very important part of the workforce, and that needs to change. There needs to be a shift in terms of that. As I say, we will do everything we can within our gift, but as I say, where we are, our hands are tied. The other interesting point about the self-directed support is we're trying to increase the arrangements for brokerage, so whereby with PAs and personal assistants, you're in effect self-employing somebody, and that can be quite a scary landscape for somebody if they're having to get into that the detail round about that and what that means as an employer. So we're trying to increase brokerage services for people, to encourage them to take on the route of SDS option. Because it's not for everyone in terms of that management of an employee, because that's in effect what it is. But again, it's it's how we encourage people to step forward as personal assistants, taking on obviously what Councillor Drysdale in terms of the actual rate of pay. But I think these are the routes that we have to explore further, because managed services is becoming more and more difficult in terms of the provision.
Thank you, Stephanie.
That's great. So thank you everyone for the discussion, and we'll move forward to recommendations. So we have one more hand up there. Sorry, Stephanie Mottram, would you like to add?
It was just, I just wanted to add apologies, maybe I should have waited to the recommendations, but what I'd like to offer up the area committee is, if previously, if you remember, some of you around the table will remember, we used to hold sort of informal workshops with yourselves to give you information on specific topics. What I'd like to offer up is if we could do that again with yourselves as an area committee with the elected members, particularly on some of the kind of the hot topics we've talked about, to help you understand. So that offer's there. If you would like to take that up, let me know and we can arrange that. As I say, some of his colleagues around the table will have been as part of that back in the day when we were Stewartry and Wigtonshire localities. So the offer's there for you.
That's great. And Councillor Sturdy,
can just follow that up, Steph, and I'll be quite happy for them to start back up, because I find them quite helpful when we done the McGarden and Castle Douglas. The only thing, could you give us plenty of notice, because our diaries are quite heavy at present, try to fit things in, if you don't mind.
Yes, that's great. That's a great point, Councillor. So thank you very much to Stephanie and Peter for your time and for that explanation. We will move forward to recommendations now. Members are asked for 2.1 to note the overview outlined in the appendix, and for 2.2, recommend any matters from the appendix back for consideration by the Integration Joint Board where considered appropriate. Are members happy to agree the recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, yep. That's great. Thank you, Stephanie and Peter. Thank you to both of you. So we'll move forward now. So it's item number 5 we're moving on to now. So it's our next performance report from Economy and Resources Annual Performance Report. So this report covers performance from 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 23. As always, this report covers a range of services and projects that are vital in helping and supporting our communities prosper and thrive. Members will have read the report that at the end of the year assessment, April 22 to March 31st, 23, our Economy and Development Service Business Plan. This was, the business plan was considered and agreed at the Economy and Resources Committee on the 8th of June. The report in front of us today contains performance data disaggregated for the Stewartry. It's good to see the positive impact the Galloway Glens project had locally. The scheme supported more than 40 headline projects, and that was up and down the Ken D Valley before coming to an end of in September. Looking forward, it's exciting to read about the ongoing developments around the Dalbeatty Rocks and Wheels project and the Carsfairn Rural Skills Centre. I'm also pleased to note that local place plans are beginning to take real shape with significant community input and engagement. Members may also be interested in hearing the detail around the SHIP pipeline projects for house building and whether these can be realised. James Little, Simon Fieldhouse and Stuart McMillan are available online to answer any questions for members. I'll open the floor to questions and comments if anyone would like to comment. So we have Councillor Setti.
Thanks very much. I'll give you a comment. Dalbeatty Rocks and Wheels is ticking along nicely. They've either lodged or are in the point of lodging their planning application. Probably Jamie will ask this question. It's on the strategic housing. How far advanced is this Port Road, Dalbeatty, Cunningham? I've brought it up before, Jamie. I'll accept any kind of housing in the area, but that area where the houses are gone, there has been 3 houses within that area flooded in the last 2 years. Seriously flooded after the storms, and they're sitting right beside this field. I think I spoke to one of the residents. I think the council are putting a new culvert in to assess, take away surface water that's coming for the school. But this area where it's beside the clinic, that field floods, and I'm a bit concerned, unless there's major work done, that this might be a scheme might not go ahead. Are you any further for it? Further down the line there with the project?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stipp, for the question. Just in terms of the Port Road development, the Cunningham Housing Association and ourselves at Strategic Housing have been working really closely with the flood risk management team within the council to ensure that this development or this site can continue to go forward. So is being proposed in terms of the culvert and the issue there around the flooding is intended to both alleviate the current issues but also enable the development of the Port Road site in Dalbeatty. So effectively it'd be allowing for additional hard standing areas to be constructed as part of that project and finding a solution. I will come back to members with a fuller update because I'll seek a current position on this from the flood risk management team But we are obviously looking to ensure that this development can go forward. Members will be aware that Stewartry continues to be one of the high demand areas for affordable housing, and also through our housing need and demand assessment work is identified as one of the least affordable places for people to actually obtain housing. So we are really looking to prioritise projects within this area. But as I say, I will come back to members with a current position on from the flood risk management team.
Thank you. Would you like, Councillor said, would you like to respond?
No, I'd just like to thank for that response, Jamie. I think I'd welcome any housing in the town as long as the residents are got to be no affected to, and it's got to be worthwhile. Thanks.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the report. Jamie, on 4.6.7 with regards to the local housing strategy, I was very fortunate to be invited to the new property, the Lorburn property at Academy Street, Castle Douglas. Was it yesterday, the day before? And I have to say to you, I really congratulate yourselves and the team at the council for working so cohesively with Lorburn on this development. The central area of it is just incredibly well designed, and residents who will be moving in there, I think the project is to time as well, which I also congratulate yourselves in Lorburn and the SHIP team on. It's going to be open plan. Every property has a balcony, and also the adaptability for disabled people is incredible, even so much so that some of the cookers, etc., are able to rise and fall. So that brings me great joy. It's more designed in keeping with the Scandinavian, German, American way of lifestyle for ageing populations and people with accessibility needs. So I really hope that we can go forward across the whole of Dumfries and Galloway with similar projects such as this, because we know we're behind the curve. So thank you for that. And then on the back of Councillor Stitt's point, I think the council needs to work really hard with Scottish Water when new developments are going in place. We've got major issues in Castle Douglas again with a development that was built a few years ago, and Scottish Water, no disrespect, but not reacting on time and not reacting quickly enough. The council roads teams have been out across the region, right from Kirkcudbright, Castle Douglas to Dalbeattie, and working very hard on culverts. But the response times from Scottish Water are not always brilliant, and we need to make sure that proper drainage is put in place when new developments are implemented. So it was just to make you aware of that. But thanks very much for the work with Academy Street and Lorburn. It's really, really a great project to see, and it'd be brilliant if it opens, if we could organise some kind of Teams visit for other councillors to see the level of quality development that's been put in place here. Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Very positive comments and well received. James, is there anything else you'd like to say or any response you'd like to make?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Drysdale, for the positive comments in terms of the development at Academy Street. It's one that has been a success, and we will look forward to those properties being allocated to new residents. While I'm always happy to take as much credit as possible for the strategic housing team, should also recognise that through our colleagues in economic development, there was also place-based investment plan funding allocated to that project. That's really great news in terms of the way we work across the council, but it does highlight that these types of projects can be particularly expensive, and we'd always encourage and come back to members where there is additional funding required, recognising all the benefits for the older population, particularly being around 150-200 metres from the high street in Castle Douglas. Just in terms of Scottish Water, yeah, it's certainly feedback that we have taken on board. Through the Council's Development Forum, we have Scottish Water involved in those meetings, and my colleagues in the local development plan team are also seeking to engage very heavily with Scottish Water, particularly around the identification of future sites from infrastructure in terms of water supply and wastewater objectives. So yeah, certainly take those comments on board, Councillor Drysdale. the feedback and share a pat on the back with Stuart there as well around the place-based investment plan funding.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. So, Councillor Young, you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with Councillor Drysdale. This looks a very exciting development in Academy Street. Can I ask, is the road designed to enable easy crossing for sort of less able people crossing Queen Street? Is that part of the design, or is that a separate aspect carried out by a roads team? I'm aware Queen Street can be quite a busy street at times, and I'm wondering if the full crossing scenarios have been put in place, or is that still to be decided? The other quick point, Jamie, some years ago you talked about development in Cotton Street at the old abattoir. Is that just in the back burner now and forgotten about? Thanks very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Young. James, your response.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Young, for the comments. Just in terms of the crossing at Queen Street, there was a planning condition to narrow the crossing at that point. I haven't actually been out to the site myself, so I can't comment on the stage that that's at, but it certainly was recognised that given the tenants that were going to be going into those properties and the potential, the wideness of Queen Street in the past, it was certainly recognised that a narrowing of the crossing point would be required. So yes, that should, if it has not been implemented yet, that should be in hand. As I say, that was a planning condition that was put in place. In terms of Cotton Street, as members will appreciate, that has been a particularly challenging site to try and deliver. While it is still within the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, in terms of purchase from the current site owner, that is an issue that work has been ongoing between Cunningham Housing Association and the current owner. However, it has proven particularly challenging, hence the project not being allocated any funding through the Scottish Government's Affordable Housing Supply Programme in this year's budget. We will obviously update members, and it will be a member decision as to whether or not that project is removed from the Strategic Housing Investment Plan.
Thank you, James. Councillor Young, over to you.
No, thank you, James, for that full and answer. I appreciate all that you're doing. I mean, it's tremendous that was there 47 houses going up in Springholm, and they're really going up very quickly, and 23 flats in Academy Street. So we're more than getting our fair share of new housing development. So perhaps I'm being a bit greedy, wanting one in Cotton Street as well, but I'm sure you'll do your best. Thanks, James.
Right, well, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Young, for that clarification. Any other members would like to add anything before we move on? Okay, well, I'd like to congratulate the staff and praise the staff for their fine and hard work, but I'd like to move to recommendations, and I'm referring to 2.1, to review the overall summary of performance within individual head of service business plans in the Stewartry area. And then 2.2, to consider the additional area-based successes and developments as detailed in the key successes section of this report, paragraph 4.6.1 to 4.6.8. And also 2.3, to consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the relevant future committee. So, members, are we happy to agree to these recommendations?
Happy to agree, Chair.
Agreed.
We're agreed. That's great. Thank you. James, thank you very much for your time today. And what we'll do is we'll now move on, but thank you. And we'll be moving on to item number 6. So Social Work Services Directorate end of year assessment of the business plan 2019 to 2023 and a performance from the 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March 2023. And this report will be provided by the Interim Chief Social Work Officer. So the next report is the Social Work end of year assessment, and I'm sure members will have their own questions around aspects of this report. My view is that the report is quite general and that it would be useful in future reports to have a more detailed, disaggregated aspect to the local area rather than information just applicable to the region. It is, however, reassuring to read that the reduction of children on the Child Protection Register due to the intensive work with families is a good thing. It's also encouraging to learn that there is ongoing work to recruit and retain staff and build our studentship opportunities and career development opportunities for qualified workers. I've noted that there have been a number of projects which have benefited from the unpaid work scheme in Annandale and Eskdale. Could I ask how projects within the Stewartry benefit from their input? So I'd like to welcome Sarah McGarver, who's in attendance, for any questions from our members. So members, over to you for your questions and or comments. Okay, no, well, we'll move to recommendations then. And we're looking to review the overall summary of the performance within the Chief Social Work Officer's business plan in the Stewartry area. And then 2.2, to consider the additional area-based successes and developments, and that are detailed in the key successes section of the report, paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3. And also for 2.3 to consider any aspects of performance to be referred to the relevant future committee. So members, are we happy to agree these recommendations? Oh, sorry, Councillor Drysdale. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Sorry for coming in a bit late. On 4.3.2, we note that the number of referrals to Child MASH remains stable, but we're quite aware that the figures are still really, really high across the schools. However, myself and a few other councillors were kindly invited last week to the low-level mental health support project at the Robert Burns Centre in Dumfries, and it was really heartening to hear that youth work and the educational psychology services teams have been working together with university specialists who were recruited to look at how that's working within our schools. And I'd just like to congratulate on record the youth teams across the Stewartry, but also across the whole of the region, because the project itself has been hugely successful, and we are seeing more of our own youth work teams going into schools, and I hope that continues going forward, while the MASH ends up being, quite a long waiting list for people. And this is low-level mental health, but it is helpful to children who are struggling with various things. So I'd just like to thank the youth teams for that, and hopefully going forward with the the community payback order numbers, we can see that the work often gets done over in Annandale and Eskdale, and I have asked that more of these unpaid workers are able to come across to the Stewartry. I think there's difficulties there with regards to where the units are based, because there's one in Stranraer, one in Dumfries and one near Annan. So obviously it is difficult because the base at Stewartry is no longer open at the depot in Abercrombie. But, you know, if there's one or two projects that we could involve some of these people in, then I think we would very much appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Once again, it's a valued project and valued points that you've raised. And Sarah McGarver, you're more than welcome to respond should you wish to.
Thank you. Not really much to say apart from the fact that they will, you know, if there is a referral form, if people have projects that they would want to unpaid hours workers to be considered for, and they get a quick response to that. But yeah, I guess it'll depend on the practicality.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I think what we're going to do now is basically agree the recommendations. That appears to be the case, and we are most certainly unanimous there. So thank you very much, Sarah, for joining our meeting, and much appreciated. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you, Chair.
So I'd like to move. Thank you. I'd like to move to item 7. Any other business deemed urgent by the chairman, which is requiring a decision. I don't have any further business, so that concludes the meeting, and I'd like to thank you all for your contributions. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, the 20th of March, 2024. So that's the meeting concluded. Thank you.